Hello, and thank you for listening to the Testing the Spirits podcast. The title of this episode is Agreeing to Disagree. No two Christians agree 100% of the time on 100% of the issues. We might interpret a text a little differently. We might not see eye to eye exactly on how to apply it. And that's true for everybody. And that's okay. We can still hopefully be friends and still appreciate each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. So that's the way I feel. I hope you feel the same way. But with that said, there is still a line that you don't want to cross. So I wanted to talk about this. I'll let you know where I draw that line. But I agree, Christians should not quarrel and fight over every little issue. Now, I think Christians can have vigorous debate, and sometimes two people can argue, quote unquote, argue, and others might see that as being divisive when it's not actually contentious. It's two people working through the issues. It's iron sharpening iron. So sometimes that's taken the wrong way. You have to know your audience, and you have to realize there are some people who can go back and forth, and you can have a healthy debate with them. And it's good because we all need to be challenged. But then there are others who maybe can't handle that. There are some people, maybe a new believer, you need to give them a little grace, but there's just some people, been Christians a long time, and you just can't say anything that they disagree. They hear any little thing they don't like, they disagree with, and they freak out. And that's not good. We need to be able to agree to disagree. But in talking about this, Romans 14 comes to mind. We don't want to fight and cause division over disputable matters. Paul says in Romans 14, verse 19, "Therefore let us pursue the things which make for peace, and the things by which one may edify one another." So we need to recognize there are people who have a sensitive conscience, and while we need to defend Christian liberty, we don't want to cause our brother to stumble. So when it comes to areas where there is maybe widespread disagreement, I really do like this expression. I know some people might not like this expression, but hopefully we can agree to disagree on that. But this expression, I think it's really helpful. It goes like this: in the essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; and in all things, charity. Let me repeat that. In the essentials, we should have unity. In the non-essentials, liberty, Christian liberty. Okay, we can agree to disagree. And then in all things, love. In all things, charity. Now, I realize that quote itself, it has been ascribed to all sorts of people. You can look it up, and some say it was a quote from St. Augustine, and some people will just, it's St. Augustine, I don't want to listen to it, There's some people who say it's John Wesley. I don't think we really know where the quote comes from. Whoever said it, I think the point stands, however, in the essentials, like the virgin birth, or the resurrection, or the deity of Christ. In those essential doctrines, we should have unity. In the non-essentials, we should protect Christian liberty and freedom of conscience. Now, this is where I think it becomes a little tricky here, because I don't think anyone would disagree with the first part, in the essentials, unity, but depending on how you define non-essentials and Christian liberty, we'll talk about that in a moment. But the final point, in all things charity, our motivation should be love, right? We should speak the truth in love, as Ephesians 4:15 says. But yeah, it's this other part, the non-essentials, the Christian liberty, that takes some work to flush that out. So let's lean into that, And I'm using these terms on purpose because these are just little things that I have to admit I sort of find annoying when preachers use the expression, going through the season of life, or let's lean into that, or let's flush that out, A few years ago, you started hearing this type of thing all the time. It became trendy, and to stay on topic, I do have a reason for saying this. For example, like that type of a thing, it's not a big deal, right? That would be an example of me. Like if I made a huge issue about your lingo, and I'm going to divide and, speak ill about someone based on their lingo. I mean, that would be a non-essential. Like, that would be ridiculous, I think, to break fellowship over that. I don't think anyone would. But there are little things. For example, I actually met someone, and I know it seems like I'm going off topic, but I think this is going to the heart of the issue of non-essentials. So stay with me. I met a person who actually left their church, and they badmouthed their church to this very day because their church got rid of the pews in favor of removable seating. Now, like, I'm sympathetic to that. I prefer pews, but to leave a church over that? Like, can't we all agree that's the wrong thing to do? Or to split a church over the color of the carpet? So that's maybe an obvious example of non-essentials. Like, that really doesn't matter. You should not divide or get angry and condemn someone over stuff like that. So hopefully we can all agree. But when it comes to non-essentials, like doctrinal, non-essentials, we're talking, usually it's eschatology. People say, okay, with the non-essentials, we can have liberties. So the secondary issues, it's usually eschatology, the spiritual gifts, the mode of baptism, church government. Should the church be pastor-led with deacons, or must you have a board of elders? These are the typical things that come up when we talk about secondary issues. Now, to be clear, I have strong opinions on all of those things. And again, I've said this before, I hate to even call some of those things secondary issues because that could give someone the impression that they're not important. But what's the title of the podcast? Agreeing to disagree. Here's the thing. I can agree to disagree and still have fellowship with someone if they have a different view of eschatology. Let's say they have a different view of the timing of the rapture. Depending on their view, I might think they're wrong, but I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to break fellowship with someone or deny them church membership based on the fact that they have a different view. Now, if they begin to, let's say we bring someone in as a church member, but they do have a different viewpoint. Now, if someone begins to become contentious, right? If they begin to fight against the established doctrine of the church, it's one thing to disagree. It's another thing to be disagreeable. So if someone has another view, okay, fine. But if they're trying to undermine church leadership, then that becomes the bigger issue. So with their behavior, there might be a point where you need to draw the line. But the point is, I'm not going to separate from someone over their view of eschatology or the spiritual gifts or church government or whatever other secondary issue you think is out there. Now, if their view of church government, again, you have to draw the line somewhere. If their view of church government is that the Pope is the head of the church, that's different. That's going to be a bridge too far. Or if, let's say with the spiritual gifts, we have people who follow this channel who are charismatic, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree. We've had people in our church over the years who have had slightly different opinions than the leadership, and most of the time, yeah, we can agree to disagree. But like I said at the beginning, you have to know where to draw the line. And the line that I draw is when someone denies an essential issue. Or, and this is the tricky part, when their secondary issue threatens to undermine an essential issue. For example, continuing with the example of someone being charismatic. Being charismatic, that means, Pentecostal, charismatic, that means you believe that the sign gifts of the Spirit continue. It's also called being a continuationist. So typically that's dealing with tongues and prophecy. So if a charismatic says that they believe in ongoing prophecy, I admit I would have concerns about that. I would ask them, what do you mean? How do you define prophecy? And depending on their answer, we might be able to agree to disagree. And I've had charismatic friends throughout the years, and I think that's fine. I disagree with them on some things. They disagree with me, but we can agree to disagree. Good. That's the whole point of this podcast. However, there is a line, too far. If a person says about prophecy that Chris Valentin of Bethel Church is a prophet of God, and God is speaking to him, and God is giving him revelations, and God is speaking revelations through Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland, guess what? I'm going to draw a line. Someone might say, but Pastor, you just said that the gifts are a secondary issue. Right. But here's the thing. Sola Scriptura is a primary issue. The Bible being our ultimate authority, that is an essential. So if you claim that God is giving new revelations, especially if those revelations don't line up with the Bible, or if the so-called prophecies don't come true, guess what? Your secondary issue is now undermining an essential issue. So now we have a problem. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that is probably the best way I can explain it. So again, I would appreciate the support of some of the charismatics who follow my channel. No doubt we would disagree on several things, but I think we can also agree to disagree. But when it comes to the hyper charismatics like Todd White, Joni Lamb, and the Daystar crowd, the people at Bethel Church, I believe they either deny primary issues, essential issues, or some of their other doctrines undermine essential issues. Therefore, I could not have unity with those people. And I would actually take that a step further based on 2 John 9 through 11. John talks about the false teachers, those who aid and abet them, those who take them into their homes, who say God bless them, those who support false teachers. They, according to the apostle, become partakers of their evil deeds. So not only would I practice separation from false teachers, I would actually practice 1 degree of separation. I don't practice degrees of separation, as in degrees plural. I practice 1 degree of separation based on 2 John 9 through 11. I have a whole podcast on that. You can listen to it. Just type degrees of separation and you'll find it. But not only would I not fellowship with a false teacher, I would not recommend or endorse or fellowship with someone who does fellowship with false teachers. So that's 1 degree of separation. So all of that to say this, I believe that for the most part, if we agree on the primary essential doctrines of Christianity, we should seek unity. Maybe we're not going to be in the same fellowship. Like there are denominations for a reason, and that's because, somebody's wrong. Either the Baptists are wrong or the Pentecostals are wrong. Somebody's wrong here. The Methodists and the Calvinists both can't be correct. So, you say, well, I know who's wrong. And then people end up dividing into denominations. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have that. But until Jesus comes, that stuff is going to remain. But just because somebody is in a different denomination or sees things a little different, we don't have to condemn them. We don't have to fight with them. Just because we don't agree on everything, we can still agree to disagree if we hold to the essential doctrines of the faith. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or email me. And I'll close by repeating that statement again, because wherever it came from, I believe it does capture the spirit of what I'm trying to say. In the essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. And in all things, charity. Thanks for listening. And until next time, may the Lord be with you and have a great day.